it seems that there's a what the sun does, the Earth is kind of responding to, and this is also in response to the cosmos. It's like three different things. They're all kind of like feeling each other out, and I think all these things have consciousness. So I think they literally are like much more conscious than us. And good evidence of the fact that our magnetic field is actually pretty strong is the fact that we do have aurora, which is a symptom of that electric current. If you didn't have a strong magnetic field, you wouldn't have these strong electric currents get created as a result, and therefore you wouldn't have brilliant displays of aurora. I spent a lot of my time over the past like 3-4 years traveling around the world visiting these sites, or at least ones I find interesting. Some of them aren't really mainstream. For example, like Varna in Bulgaria is a really interesting site, but it's not in the ancient history community. Like, I think they just did something clever, not necessarily super advanced or magic, and I think you'll figure that out, or someone will figure out they just put the cube in front of them and turn it into a vase. A lot of people, they don't change at all. I'm always kind of changing and mutating a little bit, it seems. So there's a constant evolution to who I am, and that's all driven large part by my curiosity and just what I find interesting. I chase that down. Just doing my best to get through this crazy zany place that we live in.
Welcome to the Multiverse, Stefan Burns. How's it going?
What up, guys? What up, guys? Glad to be here. Thanks for inviting me on.
Thank you. It's a pleasure to have you. As I think we might have mentioned at Cosmic Summit, you were kind of an inspiration for our show. We use your content a lot on your show and promote on our show and promote your channel. So it's kind of a cool little full circle thing for us. And so we want to start really quick about Cosmic Summit, because that's where we met you in person. What did you think of Cosmic Summit? Was that your first time going, or?
Yeah, first time for Cosmic Summit. Definitely a wacky, zany place, but definitely glad I went for meeting, connecting to people such as yourselves. I was very busy with my booth, so I did not get to attend too many of the presentations. So I don't have much I can say on that. I did see most of Matt Bell's because we're good friends, and I was just able to jump out and see that. But in general, our booth the Earth Evolution booth is pretty busy. But you meet the people you're meant to meet, and who you need to connect with. And so there was a variety of interesting individuals that were making the rounds, you could say. And quite a few people came to my booth to speak to me, and then there's three guys in particular that presented some really interesting information, and just had one of them, Max Raymond, on to talk about that. I don't know about the other two, but maybe. And then met quite a lot of fans, which was really great to meet people in person and to exchange hugs. And yeah, it was definitely felt like a gathering of friends. So that was great.
That's awesome. And I felt the same way as an attendee. If I wanted to spend time going to all the booths, I was missing one of the presentations. Or if I stayed in presentations the whole time, I might miss out on the hands-on demonstration rooms behind the main stage. So it was a balancing act, which is a good problem to have.
Yeah, it was packed up with a lot of things. Who knows if they'll do a 26. But yeah, 25 was, and you know what I find really interesting about it is that a couple days after Cosmic Summit, where the logo itself is like a meteor, like crashing down, is that we have this meteorite that flew over Pilot Mountain and then crashed in Atlanta like a couple
Yes.
days afterwards. So it's like,
Yes.
all right, there's something here.
That was weird. My niece literally saw that while she was playing tennis, and
wow.
she was like, "Coach, did you see that?" And he's like, "What?" And she literally saw it, like, because we're in Georgia. Both Mike and I are in Georgia. So, did you get to hold the vases at all while you were there?
Yeah. And when I was on Matt's podcast last September, he brought them out, and we went also. He has a dedicated room for them, so we got to play with them and everything. And yeah, they're interesting. My thought that I gave him, my idea is like, here's what you need to do, Matt. And of course, everyone's told him a billion things, so
Right.
this is just another. I was like, but listen up. You probably should just you got the money. Just get like 5 or 6 different completely cubic blocks of stone, like they make for the vases. Get an entire room set up where you have every single tool imaginable, and just like make it. Figure it out and just like tap into the Schumann resonance or your ancestral history or past life or something. And I think in the process of just throwing everything you can against that cube to try to turn it into the easiest vase of your collection, the easiest design, I think you may figure out how they were made, because everyone evokes all these complicated ideas, or oh, they had advanced like machining or some alien tech, whatever. It's like, I think it's actually probably something simple but clever, because humans are really clever, and I'm actually thinking maybe it was something with water. Like we see these natural geologic formations, especially near glaciers, like where there once were glaciers where there's a rock and it gets caught with the water and it just swirls and drills out a perfect borehole. If you ever go somewhere that was once the advance of a glacier, you'll see these all over, like Sierra Nevada, you see them. Maybe they had some sort of like system with a very hard rock, and the water was positioned from some aqueduct just such that it caused the rock to spin, and over the course of a year, it made like a whole line of vases simultaneously. Like I think they just did something clever, not necessarily super advanced or magic. But and I think you'll figure that out, or someone will figure out they just put the cube in front of them and turn it into a vase and do their absolute best. Start with the chisel, move up from there.
Yeah. Maybe even make it a competition. You started with saying 5 or 6 blocks. Say, all right, who can figure out the closest, most precise, most efficient way to make something like that without spending $1 million or anything like that?
Yeah. But just to go a little further on Cosmic Summit, I think just in general, a lot of us as humans, we spend a lot of time like kind of barking or just playing with ideas and less time actually like doing things, like just actually trying to do them. I think we need to move more that direction of like, instead of talking about this feature or something, like go to the site and check it out and do some new investigative work. And so I met people there that, have been to like 2 dozen, 3 dozen, 4 dozen megalithic sites. And it's like, those are the people that are doing the work, like actually going there, writing down notes, treating it like an archaeological or historical expedition. I think that's really the key, rather than just like snipping at each other and calling one person dumb, and then they call them dumb. And we need less of that in the world already. So
there's somewhat an arena of ideas and theories and hypotheses where some people start duking it out over long periods of time, and none of the hypotheses are really tested that hard in that process.
Yeah, and then it also happens on X where people, like he mentioned, are calling each other D-bags of this and that, going back and forth. And what's cool is I feel like nowadays people can, I guess you do need some resources, but you can do your own archaeological expedition if you want to, right? I've met a few friends, that are doing stuff like that. And there's guys like Wandering Wolf, Michael Collins. He goes to all these sites himself. He doesn't have a degree. He's not associated with an institution. He just likes it. And I learn a lot from him. So I'm with you. I think we need more of that and less of the arguing, right?
Yeah. I mean, if you go to Egypt and you have enough money for the bakshish, the tipping, then you can get anywhere in those sites. Like, and they want you. They're like, hey, we got like the crazy site over here. Just like cough up a little bit. And so my first couple of days in Egypt was so expensive because I kept falling for the curiosity. And I was like, well, I guess I got a little bit. I got some pounds here, some pounds there, and all of a sudden It's like, oh, I need to go to the ATM again. But that's the thing, like all these sites kind of are open and available to anyone so long as like you got a little bit of bakshish. So you can't start digging there, but in terms of like seeing iconography and like structure and form and maybe putting things together across different sites and time periods, taking good photos. Some people report like odd like health and wellness feelings, a certain stat like electromagnetic effects or something. So like getting more comprehensive records for maybe things like that. This is all in the realm of possibility for that. So
And that's the difference between reading about purported acoustic properties versus walking in there yourself. And then if you experience something, you know from firsthand effect that, hey, there is something to this.
yeah.
Yeah. And speaking of which, on Pilot Mountain, while they were doing the whole ceremony, I noticed you were over there grounding and getting a little meditation going on right before the sunset. Did you be picking up any vibes or?
Yeah, definitely. Pilot Mountain is a pretty cool place because that's also we went there again on Tuesday. So just like a day or two before that meteor, but the day after Cosmic Summit officially came to an end, which was on Monday. And we spoke to the spirit of the mountain and everything. And we also asked it for a sign. Like at least I did. Like I crawled into the cave that you can crawl into, and I was like, here to be Earth's servant and messenger, and give us a sign that you heard us. And then we get this meteor that people purport flew over Pilot Mountain before going into Georgia.
Yeah.
It was hard to find the exact track of it, but that's what I saw. People were reporting on like it actually flew over Pilot Mountain or that zone. It's like, all right, there's something to this. So yeah, I felt the energy quite strongly, and we had the Native American elder or shaman, we call him, who was leading some of the ceremony for the opening trip on Friday, and I thought that was really good too.
Yes, it was.
Yeah, he's Yona Frenchhawk. He's supposed to be coming on the show here eventually, so hopefully that happens. So, like I mentioned, it's kind of biographical in nature. So, would you mind sharing with us, like, who Stefan Burns is? Where does he come from? And how did he get into this stuff?
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I maybe I don't really know who I am. People from high school don't recognize me anymore. I look quite a bit different. But it's just, you change, but I'm not really any different than what I was, but a lot of people, they don't change at all. I'm always kind of changing and mutating a little bit, it seems. So there's a constant evolution to who I am. And that's all driven in large part by my curiosity and just what I find interesting. I chase that down. And so I always had an interest in nature and in rocks and biology and all these subjects, history and archaeology as a kid, like very much someone that's interested in a ton of different things. And after high school, went to UC Davis and got a degree in geology. And originally it was a degree in history. And at the junior college, I did like 5 classes in anthropology and archaeology because I was super fascinated with it. So I effectively have a minor in that too, though it's not official or anything, but I did enough classes basically to do that. And then after geology, got into geophysics and better understanding the Earth through these geophysical methods, like taking magnetic field measurements, taking seismic measurements, and measuring the sound waves, microseismic waves, and passive seismic, and doing resistivity surveys, a lot of GPR, so ground penetrating radar, and just building up that knowledge base and expertise set through all that normal career work before eventually just simply the container, I guess you could say, just wasn't big enough anymore. So I left my job and ventured off into the world and started a YouTube channel, which already had maybe 50 subscribers. Because I uploaded like 2 videos that almost no one watched, but it gave me like 50 subscribers over like 5 years or something. And just slowly started to build that out until it is where it is now. And now I have a lot more freedom and flexibility to do more things. It was part of a research sabbatical.
Yep.
You research into a lot of topics, and then best way for me of really integrating something is then do a presentation on that, a final end result deliverable. So that's the video presentation, or it's like the video essay, whatever it is. So the YouTube is really an outgrowth of me wanting to do deep research in a bunch of things and giving myself the time to do that. Because if you're doing a normal 9 to 5, it's really difficult to do some sort of side hustle, you could call it. It's possible. It's just so difficult nowadays, and especially if other responsibilities, pets, family, then it gets even more difficult. So
that was a great overview and not terribly dissimilar from Dave and I's foray into YouTubing ourselves. I never would have started this on a 9 to 5 or a 7 to 7 or anything like that.
Yeah, same. I took some time off work for a back injury, and I was like, Mike and I met at Cosmic Summit, the previous one, and so I was like, hey, want to start a crappy YouTube channel? And he was like, yeah. And then so here we are. Now here we are.
Would you mind, right before you transitioned into content creation, the nature of that research? Was it with a private research outfit? Was it with a university affiliated research org? How was that going?
No, I mean, I think the future of learning is basically just self-directed. Fortunately, it's also a skill. So there's a skill to learning skills. And so that's an important component to recognize. And not everyone has that skill as developed. So then the first step for them would be to develop the skill of acquiring skills. But it's just all self-directed because I've already been pretty good at information acquisition. I mean, in school, all the way up until calculus, which is the calculus classes that math majors had to take, I never really had to study anything. I could just hear it and just know it. But then in college, I really learned how to like actually study, and then I kept that going forward. And so I had a variety of topics that I was interested in, and I knew that I just wanted to learn more about them. So it was like, okay, let's load up the papers, let's read them, highlight them, produce the videos as the end result deliverable, because it's very efficient. I can perhaps get some YouTube subscribers and maybe eventually get the channel monetized and make some money, keep this going. But it's also this education delivery, not for myself, but also for others. But it was all just self-directed. It wasn't through any single organization or group or going back and getting a master's or anything like that. It's been an idea, but nowadays I don't think you need to. And you don't have to then deal with the baggage that comes with a lot of universities now with all this like special DEI or whatever stuff. It's just, there's just a lot of stuff that's not what you're actually there for now. But it works. That method works best if you have the self-motivation, discipline, and you know how to kind of do it in the first place. And then you're willing to develop that skill and, be slower at first and it gets faster later on. So that's an important caveat. But
it's a good observation that a lot of times universities are run by business people and are subject to the, whatever's in vogue in the business world of that time.
Yeah. Yeah. And so in 2020, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask, did COVID have something to do with you just changing directions and going hard on your YouTube channel?
Yeah, I mean, we had to switch to work from home, so I didn't have to go into the office anymore. So I switched to work from home. But I mean, if I bring in one of the topics I talk about a lot on my channel, that's astrology. I also have some huge astrological activations, you could say. So believe it or not, I didn't know this at the time. I looked back later, I was like, oh, wow, okay, that makes perfect sense now. You learned the symbology and the archetypal symbolism, and basically it was spot on with the date and time and everything. So the simple way of putting it is that this was destined by the universe to happen. I wasn't meant to stay in a certain path. I was meant to really venture off my own. And then, for example, like the reason I think these ancient sites are important to visit and study more, and I've done a lot of that myself, actually. I just don't make videos on it. It's not like I've been to every site in the world, but I've done quite a lot of my time, spent a lot of my time over the past like 3-4 years traveling around the world visiting these sites, or at least ones I find interesting. Some of them aren't really mainstream. For example, like Varna in Bulgaria is a really interesting site, but it's not in the ancient history community. It's more Neolithic. I think the Neolithic's really interesting. But I think it's important to like experience these things yourself. And after I went to Egypt, that's right when the YouTube channel like blew up. So there was definitely a ton of synchronicities when I went to Egypt. I went inside 5 different pyramids, went to a ton of different temples. I went there intentionally too, not just like, oh, taking photos and going like this. Like I was purposely connecting to the ancient energies there, invoking them, calling upon them, and really forming that shared resonance. And then less than a month after I came back from that trip, I had a video do really well, all of a sudden go viral, and that bumped me up from 5,000 to 35,000 in
Wow.
about a month. And so that then kickstarted the whole thing. You know, getting to 5,000 was a huge grind, like
Yeah.
2+ years. But all of a sudden, once you're at like 35,000 or 50, now you can start to grow quite a bit faster, and it's actually worthwhile. So, but that happened right after Egypt. Coincidence or not, I don't know. You decide. But I personally, I'm like, that was definitely not coincidence. It felt like an activation from going there consciously.
What was the video topic that blew you up?
Well, it wasn't. Yeah, it's the thing. It wasn't any different than some of my other videos I was making. Very similar to the format right now, where I just bring everything together. That one specifically, though, was on how we had Saturn moving signs. So it's moving from Aquarius into Pisces, and basically, I was just talking about, you know, this 3-day period, like this is it, like the activations here are just something catchy for the algorithm. Never worked before, but I figured it was a good thing. And so I went ahead and released that, and it just blew up on the channel. So it just happened to catch the thumbnail wasn't especially good, but it happened to catch interest.
Was that exciting or scary or both? Like, was that pretty exhilarating when it's all of a sudden your YouTube's just going nuts like that?
Yeah, yeah, definitely not scary. I mean, as you guys know, you watch a video, see how it performs. Then all of a sudden there's a state change. And so you may be watching the analytics and it's like, oh yeah, like you're getting, let's say, I remember at one point I had a video that went to 3,000 views, and that was like a big increase. I was like, whoa, it's doing like 100 views an hour. Awesome, right? Well, then this one all of a sudden is doing like 5,000 views an hour, or 10,000 views an hour. So it just shifts your perspective, and makes you realize that there's a lot more people out there that are interested in this stuff than you may have thought before. And I think with YouTube also, I've seen this time and time again. I keep my eye on other creators, just very casually. I don't go too crazy into like tracking other people's analytics, but especially small creators I watch. And I think the algorithm specifically will reward those that are consistent across time, and they're also willing to iterate and make improvements and not just stick to some formula. And so if you're just constantly doing the same thing and not like updating visuals or messaging or format or any of this stuff, good luck. You're probably not going to make it. But if you are consistent and you apply all that creativity on top of that consistency, eventually it'll happen. You have to be bringing something new for it to eventually trigger. But YouTube, you have to think about the platform. It wants to encourage creators. So I think there is some factor there that at some point it just chooses a video. And I don't think you can really make a video go viral. I mean, you kind of can, but in general, I think it just chooses one at some point. And it may not be your best video. It definitely probably won't be. It may not be your most creative or the best thumbnail. But at some point, it just pushes a wave of interest behind it. And then from there, you can start to be a little bit more precise and hopefully guide it along.
That's good insight. We appreciate that, being on sort of the front side of that wave ourselves. We're paddling out into the seas.
Yeah, that's great.
So Mike and I, like, so we're fans of your show, and we watch it fairly regularly, and so wanted to get into like a few things in relation to the topics that you cover. The first one we had listed was, kind of the solar terrestrial physics community versus the climate change community. Mike, did you want to say something on that?
Yeah, so you describe yourself as a geophysicist. You're obviously doing research into the physics of Earth, solar interactions with the Earth. Have you observed collaboration between those research areas and the climate change, like IPCC type of meteorology, climatology research fronts, or is that something you think that's separate? What have you observed in your time?
Yeah, no, I haven't seen much overlap. And so I'm actually a little odd in the fact that I pull info from both camps
Hmm.
because you wouldn't have such a well-developed, let's say, climate change group if there wasn't something to it. Now, I'm not saying everything's correct. A lot of this stuff is based off of models, and it's driven to acquire funding for certain green energy projects. There's a lot wrong there, but fundamentally, it's not complete lies and hogwash. There is some good info there, and then with the solar stuff, it's likewise. There's also some good info there, but what happens, and this is just in general, and this kind of touches on a little bit what we were talking about earlier, is that there's just so much polarity right now in the world, so much division that most people and I said this statement earlier. I was talking to my aunt about this, and she was like, that was really something. I'm thinking about that. I think in a world that's ever changing and becoming less and less stable, a lot of people are finding stability in their beliefs.
Hmm.
And so they have to they go 100% all in because they can just believe that, and that gives them some sense of purpose, but also like foundation. Whereas,
Structure.
whereas personally, I found stability in myself. When I quit my
Mm.
job and jumped off that cliff, you could say, as being an entrepreneur and just making it work, and you're starting to flap your wings, you're like, I hope this works, right? You just learn stability in yourself. I had piggy banks, but I didn't want to break them because these are like investments for the future. So I'm out there living in hostels in Europe, hoping to not spend more than $50 a day, if that, right? Like you learn self-determination and grit, and most people haven't gone through that process or had that coming of age journey. And you can have that any point in your life. It doesn't have to be 18 or 16, though ancient cultures would put that
Mm.
early on, which is very smart of them. Um, but most people just haven't had that, and so I think a lot of people have latch onto beliefs, and there's also just a lot of programming out there. So
Hmm.
if you are just only given climate change programming, then it's only CO2. Whereas if you get into, it's more stuff on the right now, right? That's like lefty stuff. More on the
Right.
right, it's like, oh, uh, you know, we can't blame cow farts and burps or whatever for this stuff. It's just they have some of the stupidest things and uh, little jokes and arguments. It's like, listen, like ozone is a atmospheric gas with an incredibly low concentration in the parts per billion, but it has massive effects on our planet. So just because something's only like 400 parts per million, CO2 is like 430 right now. Just because it's parts per million doesn't mean it has no effect. Now, is it the main effect? No. The sun clearly is the big thing because, like, without that thing, we're completely cold and dark on this earth. So that's number one. What are the modifying factors? What are the rhythms of those modifying factors? Sometimes one factor is probably more important than the other, and they go through waves, and there's different frequencies to those waves, and the intensity is always varying. So it's just too complex, really, to have any definitive understanding, like, oh, I know exactly what's happening. So it's like, hey, let's just look at all the things and try to figure out the truth. But if you have your beliefs as your foundation stability and gives you a sense of who you are and purpose too, right? You haven't found your own soul purpose life mission path. So that's also your purpose. Then you're just going to you're going to take in whatever that tribal belief is, and you're going to be very opposed to everything that's not that, because it calls into
Hmm.
question your sense of self, and the ego activates, and then, well, the rest is history. So that's the duality a lot of people are in. I'm not here saying that I'm like completely out of that. I'm just doing the best I can to walk independently and free, and with like looking at both sides and angles, and hopefully going orthogonal to that entire direction, because this polarity building and the confrontational stuff is literally rendering our society asunder, and it's
Yeah,
really not
it
good for
is.
the planet, um, with what we're doing to the planet in many aspects. So yeah, it's just, you see that all across the place. That's what's like, go out and do the original research or get educated rather than just focusing on drama tidbits, right? And just like this back and forth. And So that's kind of my angle there. But I don't know why there's, yeah, I guess it's just like a mindset thing. Once people are in a camp, it's really hard for them to get out of it. That's what I see, at least.
So much of that, what you said was so good, and I want to try to tie a couple of things together. Setting the intention, like you said on your Egypt trip. Some people set their intention to find the institution or authority figure that's going to give them all the right answers. They don't say, I'm going to try to find the answers. They say, I'm going to try to find someone to tell me the answers. It's a perilous time for those type of people because there are a lot of different factions peddling all the answers, all the right answers, and it's all cast in like this belief system where you root for your team and against the other team. Exclusivism and exclusivity of my camp found the right beliefs. It's too bad that yours didn't. Big thumbs down. That's holding us back as a species. But what you said about being confident in yourself and knowing how to ask good questions and then go in orthogonal, go in 90 degrees different from these two opposing sides. I think that's how we break into the next phase of this, I don't know, existence. So I really appreciate what you said there.
Yeah, and I wanted to comment too that I like the idea of getting back to our roots in that, like we were ancient cultures used to basically ritualize a coming of age experience at a young age, like when you turn 16 or 17 or whatever. And there's not really, our young people don't really have something like that anymore. That's kind of standard across the culture, you know, like whatever, it could be anything, right? But it's like a trial and a tribulation that you need to go overcome, and you need to find yourself, and you need to work hard, and you know, like learn something about yourself. And we don't set that up for our young people anymore, right? So I think we need more of that as well. But very good insight, Stefan. I really appreciate that.
Just doing my best to get through this crazy zany place that we live in, and yeah, I see a lot of benefit to these like trials by fire, and I don't think they're necessarily something to be afraid of. And you know, a lot of other countries, like people that graduate high school take a gap year, and then they'll travel around for that gap year, or they'll go work on some like farm living situation and work on the farm for like a year, like some organic permaculture deal. So these options are available for people. Or I mean, I had a job, I had 2 jobs before I quit, and I had a third one lined up, which was like a huge pay bump. So I was like, all right, that was pretty cool. But I decided to do this route, and I didn't know it was going to go this direction. I figured worst case, this could be like a year-long thing. I get a break from like a normal career, and then I go back into it. So don't be like, are you afraid that you can't get a job after taking a year break? I mean, yeah, some people really struggle to find jobs, but it's if you're afraid of not being able to find a job, or you're afraid of this or that, you're basically just saying you're afraid of your inadequacy. And that, so like if you can't address one of those, that root fear, then you're never going to find your success in life, because you have to address yourself and really see yourself in the mirror, or see your shadow, before you can really move forward and make leaps and bounds. At least that's what I think. So that is like, if you haven't addressed that fear yet of yourself, then you should probably do that sooner rather than later, because it'll create a lot of problems, and a lot of people will latch onto a relationship rather than kind of address themselves. And then that's why you see all these divorces and things. And so, there's a lot of ways it expresses, but just do it. Just dig into yourself. Get in there, man.
Yeah, learn to find, I forget the words used, but learn to find structure in yourself. I think that was
Follow
the word.
your bliss.
Yes.
Yeah, there we go.
Speaking of polarity, something that kind of comes up all the time on our show, and people are always talking about, and we know scientifically, correct me if I'm wrong, that we're in the shift. But what I see all the time online is the catastrophizing as in relation to that. Like, there's certain people, not going to name any names, that like, oh, we got 7 years left, we got 10 years left, you know. Could you shed some light on the magnetic pole shift phenomenon, and like what are we really dealing with, and what kind of time frame are we really dealing with here?
Yeah, well, there's some terminology that we need to cover first, and it's okay, and this is all just arbitrary language, so everyone's different interpretations. But let's we have some geologic terminology that we can use here. We have geomagnetic excursions, we have geomagnetic reversals. So the excursion is where it nearly flips, but it does not, it goes back. And there's varying degrees of that. Sometimes it's not as severe, whereas like the Lechamp excursion was basically a complete reversal that did not stick in place. A reversal, of course, is where the magnetic field flips and sticks. So those are the two terminologies that we have. It's established in the literature, in the books, everything. So let's use them because those are the most well known: excursions and reversals. So what's a shift then, right? If we have an excursion, we have a reversal. What the heck is a shift? A shift, I guess you could say, is just a movement of the magnetic poles, which is always happening. The poles are always moving, so there's always a pole shift.
Yes.
Or two poles shifting. Then the question is, how much are they shifting? What's the velocity of that? And is it accelerating? Is it deaccelerating? Right? Is it in an area that's outside of normal? That's really important. Because what's happening right now is in the northern hemisphere, the magnetic North Pole. So the magnetic pole in the northern hemisphere, if you want to use that, it's actually a negative pole. This is actually technically a south magnetic pole, but the magnetic pole in the northern hemisphere has rapidly moved from Canada to moving closer and closer to Siberia. But if we look at the past 1,800 years of reconstructed locations, it's actually done that circuit in this circular loop around the Arctic, according to that data, multiple times. So this isn't anything unusual just on the 1,800-year time span. Now, if we were to go out even further, right, then we're going to see a whole bunch of other unusual things too. That's when we start to get into excursions and stuff. But saying that this movement going from Canada to the ocean off of the coast of Siberia, it's right now near Gokul Ridge, so it's still in the Arctic Ocean. It's moved really rapidly. At one point, going about 60 kilometers per year, so really fast. But we've seen similar periods of velocity movement for that pole, and also in the same location just in the past 1,800 years. So it's not at all anomalous for that movement to occur in the northern hemisphere. Then for the southern hemisphere, the pole is moving much slower, about 10 kilometers per year. Right now, the North Pole is about 44 kilometers per year. So it has deaccelerated. It's actually slowed down over the past 10 years. In the southern hemisphere, it's about 10 kilometers per year. But what's odd about that one is it's actually really offset from the true South Pole axis. Whereas in the northern hemisphere, the magnetic pole in the northern hemisphere is actually almost exactly on the true North Pole axis of the planet right now, this moment in time. So it's actually almost, if in a perfect idealized scenario, it's almost exactly where you'd want it to be. It's moved a lot, but it's not at all in excursion territory, which would be like, oh, hey, we're measuring it in China.
Right.
We got a problem. We're measuring in Azerbaijan. Like, this is, guys, it's now in Brazil, right? We're not there yet. So we can't say, in my mind, that we're in an excursion until it reaches certain latitudes, which are lower down out of the Arctic Circle, which in case they would need to really accelerate and move a lot faster. And you also get field strength drops with excursions. And the Earth's magnetic field is much more complex than most people paint the picture. You have the magnetic field emanating from the center of the Earth. Exactly how it's generated is still a big open question. Is it a geodynamo, georeactor combo, or maybe something totally else? I don't know. I think it's probably a georeactor, geodynamo combo, where you have this slurry of ions moving and discharged elements creating this magnetic field. That makes sense. We do know certain configurations of these electric currents because of the morphology of the magnetic field itself. Then we know that the mantle absorbs most of that magnetic field, about 99% of it. And we're discovering new magnetic structures in the boundary between the mantle and the crust that's also going to attenuate that signal. Overall, though, we have a pretty good sense of that, all things considered. Then the field all of a sudden hits the surface. No longer is it really absorbed into rock because now it's hitting air or ocean. And so it broadcasts out to space, and there's an inverse square law. And so it just radiates out and has a certain polar field structure. Most people have seen this. But there are other dynamics at play. You have electric circuits creating this magnetic field inside the Earth. Again, ambiguity as to what exactly those circuits are made of, what, their characteristics, whatever. You also have electric circuits, though, in the ionosphere, which is about 50, 100 kilometers up, going all the way to like 1,000 kilometers up. These create magnetic fields. And so those now will add or subtract to the total magnetic field emanating from the Earth. You have electric circuits at the magnetopause, where the solar wind hits Earth's magnetic field. These generate, again, magnetic fields that add or subtract. So you have all these different systems in place that create what we know as Earth's overall magnetic field. But if you were to have changes in the ionosphere, then you're going to measure changes in magnetic field in the ionosphere. So the point is that if you look at the field strength measured on the Earth across time, our field strength across the last 50,000 years, and actually going back to like the 500 million year record, our field strength right now, cumulatively at the surface, is actually very strong. It has gone down from its peak 3,000 years ago and 1,000 years ago. It was anomalously strong 3,000 years ago, 1,000 years ago. It has dropped from that, but it's still historically very strong. Now, if you add in some of these other dynamics, and we have these observatories all over the globe, different universities, independent organizations. There's no fudging that data. We know the field strength on the surface of the Earth to a pretty good degree. Some places like the oceans don't have observatories, of course, every square mile, whatever. But overall, we got it, guys. Okay, we got it. We do. And so anyone's saying,
not photoshopping the red in like those Mars pictures.
yeah, it's like we have the data. Anyone could buy a magnetic field, a magnetometer, set it up, and get the reading. But if we go out to the ionosphere, now we're interacting in those different current systems. So, for example, one of the big things that people say as it relates to, oh, the field is declining and we're about to have a flip and it's, oh, the world's going to end, right? They will reference this article that came out in 2014, I think it was, or 2016, on the swarm satellites. I think it's 2016, the swarm satellites, and how the magnetic field was weakening 10 times faster than was originally accounted for at the surface. They had just launched the swarm satellites, and they had 6 months of data. So they didn't have a full year of data to work with. But it's high resolution, and they were also measuring during the weakest solar maximum that we've had since the early 1900s. Solar cycle 24 was anomalously weak. It wasn't a grand solar minimum, but it was anomalously weak. Well, guess what? Solar activity, like flares, charges up the ionosphere, creates stronger electric currents in that system, which generate these magnetic fields. So an important component of Earth's magnetic field strength, once you go off into the ionosphere, is governed by the ionosphere itself. And so if the solar cycle is weak, it's going to show up as much weaker than it would have been, let's say, in solar cycle 23, when it was about average field strength. And then with time, we got better data. And that was like one article that came out with that statement. And people have jumped on that and carried it since, and built up now all these conspiracies that, they're fudging the numbers and they're lying to us. Meanwhile, anyone could go out, buy a magnetometer for $5,000 and measure this if you want to, at the surface at least, right? So we know the field at the surface is changing very slowly, and it is declining very slowly, but not anomalously or frighteningly so. Out in space, the dynamics are different, but everything now with solar cycle 25 being stronger, seems that everything is basically fine. And good evidence of the fact that our magnetic field is actually pretty strong is the fact that we do have aurora, which is a symptom of that electric current. If you didn't have a strong magnetic field, you wouldn't have these strong electric currents get created as a result, and therefore you wouldn't have brilliant displays of aurora. You would have much more muted effects in some aspects like we see. Geomagnetically induced currents would be really weak. Like 1859 Carrington event, really strong GICs. You wouldn't get that if Earth's magnetic field is really weak. You would have more direct particle bombardment down to the surface. So some people, they haven't really thought through, in groups, whatever, they haven't really thought through it. And a lot of people also, if we're just being honest, there are liars out there. There are cheats. So these are real things that we have to account for, and a liar won't tell you that they're a liar. So,
And YouTubers are all somewhere along that spectrum, aren't we all? So.
I mean, yeah, I do my best. I'm sure I'm going to get many things wrong over the course of my career on YouTube, let's say, but I'm very interested in exploring new ideas and then over time giving them a shake and seeing what ends up sticking.
Well, there's money and engagement in catastrophizing. So, but you just made me feel way better, Stefan.
yeah.
So thank you very much. Because it's hard, it's a lot to think about, right? It's a lot of data to synthesize, and it's a lot of stuff. So that's why it's nice to have somebody like you, pump the brakes on some of that stuff that you see, because that permeates through X and YouTube and everything like that. So,
and one final follow-up is that we could be at the beginning of an excursion, but if we are, it's at such early stage that it's basically too early to say confidently that it is.
Right.
But I mean, at any point, we could be at the beginning of that. But I would say we need to see the field strength at the surface go down quite a lot more, because we see these reductions during excursions, 10% the strength, 5% the strength. The main dipole field goes away. The quadrupole gets a lot stronger, or at least maintains the strength. The octopole also maintains the strength. And we'd also need to see the movement outside these zones. And we have neither of those main conditions, and everything else is pretty secondary to that.
That's also a good but simple point about if the magnetic field of the Earth had weakened significantly, if you put a magnet next to something that's not magnetic, it's not really going to interact that strongly. The fact that we're having those interactions means that we're still magnetic.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a really big one that most people haven't really thought of, or kind of, you have to kind of think about it. But once you do, like, oh yeah, okay, like you wouldn't have global aurora as easily with a strong solar storm impact if the magnetic field wasn't really there. You would have direct ground level enhancement of particles, and that would cause other effects, but not really, let's say, really strong global aurora. At least we don't think so. I mean, ideally, we could go back to the Lechamp excursion right at the lowest point and have a solar storm hit and actually make the observations. That would be ideal.
Observations. To kind of pivot slightly from that topic, but interactions between the sun and the Earth and the effect on our health, the magnetic field of the Earth, is that protecting us and keeping us healthy? What would be different if a solar storm hit and we didn't have the magnetic protection?
Yeah, that's an interesting idea. Well, we see that the magnetic field is connected to our heart. And so we have variability in our heart rate variability, the timing of the beats. And we see that there are changes in some of these heart rate variability rhythms, especially the lower frequency ones, with solar activity. But we also see changes like blood clotting, and it seems to affect just in general the bioelectric system of the body. And maybe this is for blood clotting specifically. Maybe that's like the zeta potential of red blood cells and things of that nature. But overall, there seems to be some pretty profound effects. One of the people that I really like, Robert Becker. He wrote he wrote the book The Body Electric, and he talked about how a magnetic field flip may not be that big of a deal. I'm not saying I necessarily agree with that, but he's like, I'd be more concerned if the micropulsations change, the Schumann resonances. He's like, that probably could be a big deal for life. But as it relates to the magnetic field, that flip may not be the biggest deal. I mean, we had that Lechamp excursion. The Neanderthals did die off around the same time. We did have an explosion of cave art and paintings. We had megafauna extinctions in Australia at that time. My thought process there, and so like one of the things that Robert Schoch presented was, this big solar flare impact, and that's why people went to the caves in like Turkey and other places. My only kind of problem with that, and it's not like that didn't happen per se, but I think this is too short of a time period to like, oh, you see the sun maybe do something different, and then so we got to get to the caves now. It's like too immediate, and you're not going to have long-term preparations for something that's immediate, but not like that probably. But what could like cause you to make a large cave system is during a geomagnetic excursion, where the field strength, let's say the dipole strength goes down to 5%, you're going to get a huge increase in galactic cosmic rays. Because what they also see during these excursions, or at least the Lechamp one, evidence is suggesting that the sun was also undergoing a sequence of grand solar minimums. And so it seems that there's a what the sun does, the Earth is kind of responding to, and this is also in response to the cosmos. It's like three different things. They're all kind of like feeling each other out. And I think all these things have consciousness. So I think they literally are like much more conscious than us. So that's why they're able to react to each other. But that's a whole different conversation. But if let's just use that scenario, there's a grand solar minimum, and Earth's magnetic field strength is going down. It takes 100 years, let's say, to in that like sub 10% zone.
Yep.
Grand solar minimum means you have a very weak heliosphere, so your first deflector of galactic cosmic rays from the cosmos is weak. That's the sun's magnetic field, the heliosphere. Yep. So you have more of those coming into the solar system in the first place. Then you have Earth's magnetic field at, let's say, 5% for a century, right? That's letting more in. And because of these effects, you also have ozone also degrades as well, because galactic cosmic flux basically breaks down ozone. And it increases that catalytic conversion of ozone into just like their normal oxygen components. And so now you also have less ozone protecting you from normal ultraviolet radiation. And during a grand solar minimum, you don't have that much of a change in the total solar irradiance. You don't really have any sunspot activity. So that means you don't get those X-ray flares, which charge up the ionosphere. You don't have really that much extreme ultraviolet light flux. That's also variable, but not as variable as X-rays from solar cycle peak to minimum. But the three main things are for the sun in terms of total solar radiance are infrared, visible light, ultraviolet light. Those aren't going to change. That's the main black body of the sun. So you're still going to have the sun pumping out tons of ultraviolet light, which can then break bonds, DNA. You're also then getting all the extragalactic cosmic rays, not only because Earth's magnetic field is weakened, but because the heliosphere is weakened. That is going to basically, if you were to go out in those conditions, I think you could probably actually feel that. And you'd be like, holy shit, I'm like frying right now. But it'd feel different. Like you could feel like your DNA breaking probably. And over the course of not just like a 3-day impact, which is what shock is talking about, a 3-day shock, right? But over 50 years, you are going to need that cave system and literally to have your entire way of life underground to protect you from that in caves. And why would you have a megafauna extinction? Well, they are just simply too big to get into caves. So I think that is the key, because if it was just some big burst for 3 days, why didn't we see extinctions with like other life forms that weren't megafauna? I mean, you can make an argument for the size being a factor. But we actually see some of the longest lived animals, like whales, have like really good regeneration processes, and they can live for hundreds of years. So they have like these natural anti-cancer effects. So it's not just necessarily size, letting elephants live a very long time. Like, so it's not just a size equation. But if you're trying to get like underground to get protected from this massive increase in cosmic radiation, and also just in general more ultraviolet radiation from sun, that combination would not be good long term. 50 years, 100 years,
sounds
that
like
would not
we
be
would
good.
need a sunscreen SPF factor on a logarithmic exponential scale. We would need 100,000, 10,000 SPF to be able
Yeah, metal shields, just walk around in suits all day.
I was going back and forth with some people, and I tagged you in it, so it's a good opportunity to ask you the question straight up. Is with the conversation we were going back and forth about Younger Dryas impact hypothesis versus shock solar outburst hypothesis, and somebody had commented that a CME cannot cause a high heat environment on the surface of the Earth. Is that true?
Yeah, I mean, I don't know. There's a lot more to research there.
Sure.
But the closest parallel we have. So there's a few things to kind of mention. A coronal mass ejection is a big blob of plasma that the sun shoots off, and that eventually, if it's Earth directed, will hit the Earth. If the Earth has a strong magnetic field, it's then hits the magnetic field first. Some of those particles enter into the plasmasphere contained within the magnetic field, and then as a result of natural processes, some of those will then precipitate down, guided by the field, because these are particles that have charge, so they're guided by the magnetic field. They'll go into the atmosphere, namely the ionosphere will then get them. And then the electric currents of the ionosphere do the thing. That's where the aurora are. They're in the ionosphere and a little lower down. And then most of the energy is discharged before it gets to the surface. So you do have these geomagnetically induced currents in the ground surface. And the magnetic field fluctuations that we are in, right? And that then connects to your heart. And, it's important to be aware of that if you're elderly or have a heart condition, maybe you're sensitive to these things. That is a coronal mass ejection. You also can get just and that's like slow plasma. It's like a Carrington event was like 1,500 kilometers per second, maybe even closer to 2,000 kilometers per second on the speed of that. Or some of them are like 500 kilometers per second. But you can also get what's known as a particle storm or a radiation storm. And this will be just a massive influx of relativistic particles, so traveling near the speed of light. So you have a solar flare, and depending on the characteristics, sometimes it will hit you with particles shortly after you see it, because light is traveling at the speed of light. So it happens, and then 8.3 minutes later, we see it happen on the sun. And then sometimes within 30 minutes, you will get that particle flux to kick in and start hitting the Earth. That can cause what's known as a ground level enhancement. And if you get it as actually enhancing a particle flux on the ground surface, that's when things are getting serious, because it's so powerful that it just it goes straight down to the magnetic field lines and goes down to the atmosphere and then starts these particle cascades, because one single particle traveling near the speed of light can trigger thousands of particle reactions effectively afterwards. And so it hits one with so much energy that it bursts off a dozen, which then bursts off 200, something like that. And so it progressively goes further and further down, and now you have these high energy particles that are technically of Earth origin at this point, because it's from the atmosphere now bombarding the surface.
Okay.
So that is like a ground level enhancement. So for a coronal mass ejection to like vitrify rock or something on the surface, you would need to like strip away the atmosphere or something. Like maybe you have some vacuum that gets created. I don't know. We don't have any evidence that I know of for that, but I'm not going to like rule it out. It's an interesting idea, but we have the magnetic field. It's the strongest, one of the strongest in the solar system, and it's definitely the strongest in the inner solar system. Earth is fairly smart, and it's like, yo, I got you guys, okay? So Earth has our back. But for these ground level enhancements, if you were to have something orders of magnitude stronger than what we have experienced in our record, and perhaps even, I mean, we also have records of these things, Miyake events of the past. Maybe that can do some of this stuff, but I think a lot of this is again what I think. I think as someone that went to school for geology, and I didn't feel like I was being brainwashed when I was there, and I did quite good at it. I think a lot of the people with these new ideas are throwing the baby out with the bathwater, and that we don't need to overturn the entire science of geology to basically explain the Younger Dryas. I don't think we need to. I think a lot of this stuff is accurate in terms of like what we see for geologic formations and how they are formed. And I think then I think one of the drawbacks with modern geology, you could say, is a lack of appreciation for catastrophes, which is why Randall talking about these mega floods is so valuable. In general, we see the Earth expresses itself across all the different ranges of intensity and frequency. So you're going to have catastrophisms. You're also going to have gradualism. They can both live side by side. You don't need them to be like antagonistic to each other. But
one of the things Dave and I are trying to call out on this show is these false dichotomies where you have to believe in either A or B and it's an exclusive thing. No, there is room for both. cataclysms happen, and then in between, the gradualist research is valid. So thanks for highlighting that.
Yeah, and with evolution, I mean, that's what we basically found, is that there is gradual evolution, the environment's slowly changing. Specifically, like if you have an island, then the animals will slowly change that island, but also you can have these shocks that occur. And so you can have rapid evolution. They both happen simultaneously. And so it's just maybe more of a complex, nuanced picture than maybe some people can hold in their brains, because they also have to worry about their mortgage and their wife leaving them and their two kids, and one of them's a brat, and the retirement fund is zero, right? So like you have to bring in the human equation, and no one's hugged them for like a month. And so
right.
we often don't bring these things in, but it's like it helps to explain sometimes the psychology and mindset. But I think I also have an appreciation for the sun and for the cosmos. And I think that there's a lot more possible there than we may think right now with conventional science. So I'm not going to at all be like, oh, that's definitely not possible. I'm just like, what's the scale needed to do that? That's kind of my thought process.
As we're approaching an hour, that's a really good point to wind it down on the human equation. Stefan, tell us about your website and the stuff that you got for helping us be better people.
And Dave?
That's same. I was just wanted to mention you do like a lot of spiritual work with your scientific work, and so I just really appreciate that. And is there a weird balance there before we get into we wanted to ask about the website and the herbal website, but is there like a weird balance you have to do there with spirituality and scientific rigor?
Yeah, I mean, a little bit. It seems pretty natural at this point. For example, just kind of keep my feeling on, I call it keep my thumb on the pulse and seeing where people are. And for something like in Switzerland, when the town of Blatten had that landslide hit, I wasn't going to evoke any spiritual concept. It was like, guys, this is a news report. This is a serious thing. Like, we had a landslide take out a town of 100. Thankfully, everyone's evacuated. One missing. Here are the details. There's no place for that. You could do a separate video if you wanted on that. But as it relates to these topics, as you can see, it's important that we address these things, or else we're not going to be able to see behind the curtain. And I'm not here to watch the show on stage. I'm here to understand what the heck is happening, and like to see the production crew, and the fact that you can actually walk outside the theater and there's a whole world out there. So that necessarily requires me to bring in some of these more spiritual concepts and ideas, because it is often a journey of self-reflection. And so I want to, I'm not perfect, but I want to be as clear with myself as possible and as light as possible with myself, so then I can approach these things and not get triggered. I mean, there's people online that talk shit, of course, everyone, right? So, but if I let that trigger me, then I could just end up debating them or arguing with them. And now all of a sudden I'm not focusing on the research that I want to do driving forward. And so all that, that work that I do there and I incorporate in that mindfulness, I think is really, really key. And not getting lost in a belief system that, let's say you have this hypothesis they've built up now for 20 years, and now it is who you are. And so if new evidence came out, or some cracks are starting to show, and you can't address that, or like your whole thing is based off of like a fake video, right? If you can't if you can't like address that and take the ego hit, then you got some problems, in my opinion.
Not sure if that was a subtle JFK reference, but
it could be a lot of references. There's probably a lot of things like that, but
for sure, you maybe some flat Earth. You can throw some flat Earth in there, but I noticed you enjoy helping people with their health and wellness. You've got an online store through using herbalism. You make teas and coffees and stuff like that. Where do you think that comes from, as far as like your need, or not need, maybe desire to help others with their health and wellness? And then tell us a little bit about your online store.
Yeah, I mean, one of my main passions is health and wellness. I've just always been super into it. When I graduated high school, I pretty quickly got into like powerlifting, got really big into powerlifting, so like heavy weights and wanting to
Insane.
feel like macho and everything. It's just a good thing to do. Then I explored the shadow side of that, which you go through this whole evolution journey, but it's also been more than just like lifting weights. Diet's very important. Sleep. Are you breathing
Mm-hmm.
fresh air? Are you
Mm-hmm.
earthing and grounding? That's been truly transformative. And learning about earthing and grounding with a background in geophysics has been fundamental. So when I first got into that, wanting to get like good earthing shoes like 5 years ago, couldn't find any. So eventually was able to like make my own, which is awesome. Those are on wildfreeorganic.com. Those are boots, sandals, and shoes for men and women, or just you choose whatever. And then the other component is I got more and more into herbalism because I love gardening. I've always been super big into gardening. If I can spend an hour outside gardening every single day, I'll do it. So right now I am back on the East Coast with my aunt and dad. She has a nice property around the creek, and as a result, I've had a garden here for a few years, and I make it better each year. And so you necessarily learn about these things, and you realize that 80 to 90% of the medicine that is developed by pharmaceutical companies is based on herbs or natural things, and they just create an extract, and you lose that that synergistic entourage effect from having all the different polyphenols and phytochemicals in there. And so I believe that also nature offers the medicine that you need, especially like for a community. The herbs that are growing there are probably the herbs that people need to take to heal their health and wellness problems. It's a very Native American belief, but that's what I believe. And so and there's just like such a deficiency in nutrition and nutrients getting into our bodies. Our herbs are some of the most nutrient dense sources of these things. And phytochemical or polyphenol doesn't have calories to it, but life needs more than just calories and macros. So these herbal teas were something I was developing for myself, and then as the YouTube channel grew and I talk about these things every now and then, it was clear that other people wanted access to high quality stuff as well, and not guessing with the quality. And a lot of these new trendy things too, like a mushroom coffee, this like I say this all the time on the channel, but they just literally just pixie dust stuff in, like they put lion's mane on the big right there on the front, and they just literally like proprietary amount of pixie dust, and so you're not even getting any. Or I picked up a packet of Tazo tea, which as a kid growing up, I liked the brand and everything, and it had big right on the front. It was like, let's say it was like passion flower, right? Like, oh wow, the first ingredient must be passion flower. No, it was like the fourth one down, and it was behind natural flavors. So there's just so much deception and just shitty people. If we're just really going to say it, just shitty people out there. And we need people who aren't shitty to do the things and take the responsibility upon themselves. And I think there's actually an opportunity there. So the business has done well. People love the teas. I make and mix them myself. You can get them at earthevolution.com/store. So it's www.earthevolution.com/store. The website's still being worked on, but it is active. And the bestseller is the Spirituality, which is a dream tea that I developed myself in 2022 to enhance my dreams, because I think there's a lot of value there, and like exposing some of your own subconscious things that you need to work with. And that is 4 ingredients: passion flower, chamomile mugwort, purple lotus flower, and it's phenomenal. It's really great. And I put a huge, 25% of that is the purple lotus flower. It's not just pixie dusted in. It's a fair value for some really good stuff. So yeah, it's a really important thing that I do as well, outside of just YouTube and education, edutainment, whatever.
Yeah.
That's awesome, Stefan. Thanks. I've definitely had one of those mushroom coffees. It was mostly tree bark, I think, with a little lion's mane sprinkled in. So it's good to know that there's a good source for that.
For sure. Your live stream this morning, you were talking about how your dad was getting into the coffee, and I was like, man, I need to order some of that coffee too. And I'm running out of my current coffee, so I think I might place an order. So thank you so much.
Yeah, well, place an order, and I'll kick you guys the refund, so you get for free. So just shoot me the email when that comes in. That saves me for having to create a shipping label in a complicated way. But yeah, each of
Mhm.
you order something and I'll give you that refund. Always happy to do that.
Very cool, man. Thank you so
Thank you so
much.
much.
And we really appreciate your time today, Stefan. This was a real treat and pleasure for us. And yeah, thank you so much. Hope to see you around again at a conference again sometime soon.
Yeah, pleasure. Thanks for having this podcast, doing the things, and for creating the space. I don't often share some of my thoughts like I did today. I really only do it on these podcasts because people ask me the questions. But it's good to, I think, shed some light on some of these things from a different perspective at a minimum. So appreciate you guys for that, and I wish you the greatest success and abundance with the show. And thank you everyone for watching.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Keep doing what you're doing.